Welcome everyone to Libby Rowe's virtual artist talk for her solo exhibition, Taming the Chaotic Mind. My name is Alyssa Klaus and I'm the director of the Meadows Museum of Art. For any centenary students who are here and would like passport points, if you're watching this through your personal Zoom account, please email me at meadows@centenary.edu with the email that you registered with and your name, and I'll make sure that your points are added. And if you're watching this through your Centenary Zoom account, I already have you documented. All credit for booking this exhibition goes to my predecessor, Heather Wetzel. I feel so lucky to have met Libby through this exhibition and to have been able to work with her on the installation for a few days as well. Libby Rowe is an artist working in photography, sculpture, interactive installation, and performance. Her artwork explores ideas of identity and belonging through self-definitions as informed by social and domestic constructs. Rowe is interested in breaking from traditional presentation strategies for photographs to engage viewers in a more interactive experience, as well as the role of the photographic image in relation to other media. She received her BFA from the University of Northern Iowa and her MFA from Syracuse University, and she currently works as Associate Professor of Art at the University of Texas at San Antonio. I want to introduce Libby's installation with an excerpt from an article written by a Centenary student, Siobhan Stanley, for Centenary's student newspaper, The Conglomerate. Siobhan's article is titled, Libby Rowe's Taming the Chaotic Mind, Combining One's Inner Dialogue and Art in Gruesome Accuracy. And she writes, the first time I viewed the exhibit, I hadn't read Rowe's artist statement yet, so I was thrust into her mind with no warning. Initially, I felt abruptly taken aback. Once I realized what the exhibit was about, I was in awe that someone was able to capture this concept so well. I'd never seen an accurate representation of the intricacies of thought before, so I was very startled to see it on the random Thursday I decided to walk into the museum. In her artist statement, Rowe said that it was recently brought to her attention that 15% of people do not have an inner dialogue. This made her ask, what do these people have going inside their heads? When she was researching this phenomenon, she realized that her head was incredibly noisy all the time, which made me think, as someone with a loud head, whose isn't? So I'll put the link to the full article in the chat. There it is if you want to read more. We'll have an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions during the artist talk, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat as they come to you. And I will now mute myself and hand things over to Libby.
Thanks, Alyssa. And thank you, Centenary, for having my exhibition at your school and also for bringing me in for this talk. And I got to speak to some students this afternoon, which was really wonderful as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this going. I admit that no matter how much time I spend writing a talk or thinking about what I'm going to say, it always ends up happening sort of fluidly. So stick with me and feel free to throw questions in the chat as you have them. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. If there's anything that's super pressing that you need to know right on one slide, let Alyssa know and she can bust in and I'll answer your question as well. So I'm going to start here with a video from a previous, hold on one second. There it is. We don't need the sound. This is a previous incarnation of the show. It's the second exhibition that I had, but the first one that really sort of embodied my idea and what I had originally thought of when I proposed this to the summer funding grants at my university. And I was really very interested in making something that represented my inner workings. It's very interesting to me, just like the article said, that some people don't have constant chatter in their head. Like I'm making lists and figuring out what I'm going to make for dinner and thinking about the class that I didn't quite get done before this talk. And all of these things are happening simultaneously in my head, no matter what is going on. I'm giving a talk here and I'm thinking about when my dogs are going to start barking because my partner will come home probably during this talk. What will I do to stop that? You know, where's the next crazy moment going to happen? How am I going to mitigate that while I'm giving a professional lecture this evening? And who knows, it'll probably not be well or very gracefully, but it'll happen. We'll move past it. It'll be the next thing that happens on the list, right? So this piece, you kind of are seeing the whole gallery, and I don't know if everyone who came to the talk this evening has been in the gallery or not. It's been up for a little while. So this kind of gives you that idea of being in a space or being in a space that is a representation of someone's mind. All right. So the reason I ended up making this was really kind of that impetus of the article about people not having inner dialogue, but then also for me, I have noticed that as my life has become more complex, these two are going to have a squabble. They're new to each other. That as I was my life was becoming more complex, like having children, getting that tenure track job, having to do the tenure run, getting divorced, finding another partner, he having his own 2 kids, bringing our families together, buying a new house, all of these things become more and more complicated and layered and have to kind of fit together in puzzles that aren't always the most clean-edged puzzle pieces. So for me, I thought about different ways that I could represent this. And part of that was through things that hang and dangle, right? So you can see here the power lines with birds on them. You can see some patio lights that hang down. You can see kids on swings, on a swing set. And then here are some banners, like car sale banners, that are in the space as well. Ceiling fans, all of these different aspects, or each of these different representations, is gathered from different sources of the noise that is always going on in my head. So for instance, the ceiling fans are sort of a constant flow. They breathe life into the room. And those 3 ceiling fans that are in the exhibition, one of them is my ceiling fan, one of them is Kevin's ceiling fan, and one of them is our ceiling fan together. So they represent the 2 of us in our relationship and as individual people kind of coming into the space. The birds on a wire, that was sort of the starting point of all of this, just the constant noise of social media. So each of the birds, they're all double-sided. They are printed from screen captures from my own Facebook, Twitter, all social media feeds. And those are printed in a way or cut out in a way that overlap. You get parts and pieces of different stories, different images, different chats, different text conversations. So if you look at this and you look at every single bird, which would be a true time commitment. So I appreciate you all for doing that. That you get this sort of gist of what's going on, but you don't necessarily get all the details. For me, I'm going to go back to this slide. For me, what was super important as I figured out that I wanted to use things that hang and dangle, right, to represent different aspects of life, was that I needed to have some form of structure that would hold all of the ends of the parts. So there's laundry poles, there's telephone poles, there's trees, and fences. That most of that structure for me, I wanted to draw from some other aspect of how my life is functional. And for me, that kind of structure and function comes from the maintaining of copious amounts of to-do lists, of lists of materials I need, of grids of artwork that I need for shows, of the things that we take on camping trips, of my daughter's homework that wasn't done that needed to get done during COVID, of my list of things that have to get done, of groceries, of notes that I need to remember for students or for my partner or for whoever. And I realized that I never throw these notes away. I don't know if it's some kind of obsessive need to be able to see that I've actually accomplished something, but I do cross off, I do check boxes, and that is some kind of visual way for me to know that I've actually achieved something, because no matter how much I achieve, there is always a next long to-do list. And for every box you check off, 4 more things get added. So this kind of overlapping mishmash of to-do lists and notes and doodles ends up making the kind of structure that I needed to hold everything up in the air. The banners are all drawn from news media, so different sources of news, some more refined and truthful, some less. And the idea of these is to sort of figure out how much of any given story you take in. There's always new news coming at us. There's some repetitive news in here, but then also just at what point does it all break down and lose its structure? So in 2 different places, in the first exhibition, or the exhibition in San Antonio, I should say, there was one cascade, I call it, down the wall. And in the Meadows rendition of this exhibition, there are 2 different cascades. So news comes together and then it just becomes so cacophonous, kind of noisy, loud, that it's just all a mishmash on the wall. Let's see. So the birds on the wire are social media, but you can also see birds in the background on the walls. These birds are also from social media, but they're smaller, they're flying here and there. In this exhibition, they flew on one side of the room around this way, on the other side of the room around the other way. And so they crossed at the end of the rooms and pushed back against each other. The patio lights are all representations of artistic ideas that I've had, images that I've made, artwork that I've made. So you get these little snippets of flashes of ideas. Like here you can see one of the first silhouettes I made of the bird to check a sticker out to see if it would work, the sticker vinyl would work. Here you can also see that the sticker vinyl only works to an extent, and then started peeling off the walls. So for me, I've always, let's say it this way, I've always been kind of a perfectionist about my artwork. And for this exhibition, when the vinyl started peeling off the walls, I thought, okay, well, this is kind of a perfect representation of what it is to try to get control of all of this stuff, right? No matter how structured you are, no matter how meticulously you keep on top of all the things, something is going to peel away from the wall. There's always something that you have to tend to, that you have to redo, that you have to double check with someone. You're always constantly having to go back to all of these different things. So let's see, what haven't we talked about in here? We've talked about all these elements. So it was important for me that all of this kind of created a sort of controlled chaos. I have wanted it to both represent what is happening, but also that I do manage to function in this world. Like I'm not saying my head is so noisy that I have split personalities or any kind of special challenges that anybody else doesn't have at this time. So there is this sort of reference to these controlled, chaotic moments. So in this image, you can see the lights, the birds, the banners are all sort of coming in on top of each other. And what I was very excited about when I had this exhibition was the shadows that were created by the lights just shining through all of this installation, and what got cast onto the walls and onto the floor. And you can see a lot of that here, a ceiling fan, birds, banners, little lights. All of that became really kind of interesting as sort of an idea of that residue that's left behind. So even if you've paid attention to all the social media you need to, when you stop scrolling and you put your phone down, there's still this sort of sense of that being tied to our phones, and it's right here just in case I need to get back on it. And there's always someone putting something out there that I might need to look at, pictures of my nieces and nephews, whatever's really important to me in that day. That idea of the residue, if I'm at work, my partner is still in my mind. So the ceiling fan shadow is kind of an ever-present, constant thing for me. The laundry we haven't talked about yet. Oh, perfect. I love it when slides come up at the right moment. The laundry represents my friends and family. So in this, you see my daughter, Violet. This is her, and her with her cousins. And you also see my other daughter, Violet, who is the little blondie one here and here. It just so happens that my partner and I got together and both have daughters named Violet. We also have a son named Cash, because Violet would be a weird name for a boy. But all of these are cutouts of shapes of laundry. So pants, shirts, socks, underwear, bras, swimsuits, sweaters, jackets, all of that put onto these laundry lines that are sort of hung in the traditional way of my grandmother and my mom putting laundry out in the backyard when I was young. And I love this. They're printed on silk, so they're very thin, they're very flowy. So as you move through the gallery, they sort of, you bump into one strand and it hits the other strands, and everything sort of shimmies and moves. And the laundry might hit a light, which might hit a bird line, and then everything sort of takes on a little bit of motion. And the laundry is so soft and flowy that air movement from air conditioning or heater vents can also sort of give that a little flowy movement. I have a really happy life. I have a lot of fullness, and I am glad that that is represented through images of my sweet daughter and I having a tea party, the girls doing their face masks. This was during homeschooling, my daughter on my bed with her bum in the air, our sweet pooches. All of that is really represented here. And even though it's noisy and even though it's positive, it's still, I'm going to skip the video part of this, I think, or maybe I'll just talk a little bit. I'll just talk a little bit. So for me, even though there's positive and there's negative, the noise is just noise. This is the representation of the fences. And for me, again, fences are structure. The fences, all of the images in the fences are representative of my professional job as an academic, and the other kinds of related consulting I do. I'm a AP reader for the studio art AP exam for high school artists. I have been part of boards of the Society for Photographic Education and Texas Photographic Society. And so meetings and Zoom meetings, especially now, and all of those kinds of things show up in the fences that also provide a little bit of structure. And the thing I liked about the fences is they also block, right? A fence keeps you in or keeps you out, but it's always a sort of visual blockade to getting to the next thing or the next place. And work, I think, oftentimes does function in that way. Okay, so this is a quote by Christian Bultansky, who is an artist, mainly works in photography and light, I would say. A lot of his work is about the Holocaust. He creates altars with images of people who died in the Holocaust from their passport photos, and then also, and light, light bulbs. He also creates these little structures that are shadow kind of silhouettes that are lit and then fill the room with their presence. And I bring this quote from him because of the idea that no matter what I'm doing as an artist, I really feel like once the observer comes into my space and into my work, that is when things get completed. So without someone else to engage with this space and move the laundry with their air movements and air currents, without them seeing and noting the noise, it's sort of like if a tree falls in the wood, does anyone hear it? I love the idea that I am working with an audience to create or to complete my own work. And this is one example of his work that has inspired me for a long time. In this case, you can see the little structure down here in the middle. It has these just tiny metal or paper sculptures that are then lit by 4 lights in the room. But the space, right, for such a small sculpture, this takes up a lot of space and emotion and presence in the room. Annette Messager, who happens to be married to Christian Bultansky, is my all-time favorite artist. And I was speaking to the students today and decided to put a little bit of her work and another artist who is incredibly inspirational to me in these, so that you can just sort of see where my mind is as an artist. Annette Messager does a lot of work with very small photographs that are then hung on the wall in these shapes that are kind of altar-like, kind of reference to like object. And oftentimes she will also use things like these dresses, text. She's French, so all of the text that you see here in these little snippets is French. And the way that she allows herself to make her work from pretty much any kind of medium or material, to be flat, be form, three-dimensional, be installed in different ways, is something that to me was incredibly freeing when I found her as an undergrad or graduate student. I always did photo and sculpture when I was in undergrad, and I was one class short of having a dual emphasis in both of those. And for some reason, the structure of art programs sort of limits you in your mind to say, well, I'm a painter, or I'm a photographer, or I'm a sculptor, or I'm a filmmaker. When really, I think now especially, we are artists and we are conceptual artists a lot of the time. And so I make work. If you look at my website, all the different bodies of work you'll see, I look, again, very schizophrenic, but I'm not. They all are just different ways to access my ideas and to communicate those ideas. And for me, the idea is most and foremost the most important thing. How I communicate it needs to be appropriate to the idea. So I'm just going to flip through some of the work that she does. Some things are kind of fun and a little quirky, but also still sort of borderline frightening, surreal, very psychological. They tap into different aspects of our psyche, right? Dream. She, I think, has probably been one of the most important or influential people to me in terms of thinking about photographs. Whoops, this is the last one of her. Thinking about photographs not as a rectangle in a frame. Oh, look at me sitting in front of my framed rectangles on a wall, but as a kind of opportunity to take from and push and pull the amount of information that somebody gets from an image. I didn't include work from other bodies of work that I've made. One being Like Panes of Glass, which I'll be talking about with folks from Indiana, where that show is on Friday this week. It's busy art talk week. But I like the idea that the silhouette of an object can give you as much information as the imagery that's inside of that, or that's included or excluded. And I am most interested in what is excluded in that way. Melanie Walker is another contemporary artist who I find incredibly influential and inspiring, more inspiring, I would say, than influential. I found her because I was looking for other artists who work from the house shape motif, just like the little houses, right? Peaked roof, rectangle with a triangle on top. And found Melanie's work. I brought her as a visiting artist. They do kites, they do all sorts of things. But she also is interested in communicating idea, right? These are all images of leaves printed on silk fabric. And then these are all aspen tree bark, I will say, tree trunks, printed again on that silky fabric and hung in the gallery space. I have a love affair with the house shape, this simple, sweet house shape. For me, it's like the most pure representation of family, of home, of where we live, of how we identify ourselves. And her work utilizes the house as sort of a mask or a headpiece. You can see images in here of people that are wearing houses as their head. And then landscape. And I love the idea of putting multiple things together with different imagery on them to create these kind of scenic situations. She makes these wonderful, crazy puppets with the heads, with the house-shaped heads, and then they're marionettes. So a house-shaped head person, you can see on the left image, the house head-shaped people with this marionette. And then there's an image printed on fabric of the people using the marionettes underneath the houses that are the scene for the marionette to act or be performing in. These are some of their kites. They print their work, they make them into kites, and they fly them in the world. They go to kite festivals all over the world. I just like this idea. Alyssa mentioned that, I'm really interested in how we can use the photographic image in ways that are other than what you see back here, right? Take it off the wall, engage with it in a different way. How does that image change if you are engaged with it physically rather than standing in front of it and separate from it? So she and her partner, George Peters, make a lot of installation work, a lot of house shape, house driven. These are hand puppets. And they all have hands. I know I'm easy to please, but I love this, like the idea of these being portraits, but having just one eyeball on text on a house as the head versus a very Romare Bearden cutout eye and nose versus a more photographic face, and how textures are the bodies and text. All of that comes in. This is another great example of somebody just giving themselves permission to use and utilize anything that they feel can help communicate an idea. And these are some of the ways that you can experience these. This exhibition, or this image, is from an exhibition that had images that were about 8 by 10 inches mounted to the wall flat. So when you come in, you can sort of see them if they're above your head, or they just look like a table or a shelf. And then they're each lit by individual lights from above. And that casts the image onto the wall as a, what is that, a rhombus or a tetrahedron? I'm not sure. You'd think I would know that. I did just go through 6th grade math and homeschooling during COVID, but all of this is to say that I talked with every student, and Professor Shea may not love me later or may love me very much, because I gave each and every one of those students permission to just explore and experiment and figure out how the ideas that they were talking about are best communicated or put into the world or into a gallery. So back to my show. This is the Meadows Gallery, and how this exhibition is existing at this time. the other two fans, so you can see me and Kev. And in this exhibition, you can really see the shadows and the fence. And you can see sort of why the shadows are interesting, or maybe you don't find them as interesting as I do, but in your gallery, I was super intrigued by how the laundry looked on the wood floor. And in the installation that I showed you before in San Antonio, I decided to photograph the shadows, and they have inspired this next series of work. And right now there are 6 images. There may end up being more before the show comes down at Meadows. They are heightened images. So our walls were white, your walls are gray. The lights that are cast on the from different lamps ended up creating this sort of sense of different colors when I heightened the settings for the photographs. It heightened the texture of the wall. I love this kind of crisscross of information and knowledge and kind of push and pull of focus and lack of focus, of importance and lack of importance. And these became, for me, kind of an interesting, poetic representation of that noise, right? I mentioned the residue before. This kind of residue was really interesting and intriguing to me. I don't often make super beautiful photographs, but I find these 6 images to be very intriguing and actually beautiful, which is so weird for me. Yeah, so this is it. That's the end of what I have prepared today. And I am happy to answer questions. I am happy to do whatever Alyssa would like me to.
Thank you so much, Libby.
Sure. Should I leave this up or stop sharing or?
Maybe stop sharing for now, but if a question, if you've got a picture to show with an answer to a question, you're welcome to share again. Sure. So yeah, if anyone has questions, feel free to submit them in the Q&A function or the chat function. While we wait for some to come through, this is just a reminder to any centenary students that want passport points. If you're watching this with your personal Zoom account, email me at meadows@centenary.edu, and I'll put that in the chat, and send me your name and the email that you're watching this with, and I'll make sure that your points are added. But if you're watching this with your centenary Zoom account, I've already got you listed down. So we'll start with a question that I've been getting a lot just with people coming into the museum. They always want to know about the laundry and how did you print on the fabric and how did you cut it and all of that. So do you mind talking about that for a bit?
It's a secret. No, I'm just kidding. It's not at all a secret. I ordered the fabric. It comes on a roll and the fabric is connected to paper. So kind of a waxy paper backing, if you will. And you feed that through. I use an Epson 42-inch printer or 44-inch printer, the archival pigment prints, and with the pigment inks, and that allows me to print whatever I want to on it. Then these we cut out and then peeled and then burned the edges of them with like a wood burning tool so that they wouldn't fray too much. So it's as simple as that. And I say we because I had 2 amazing graduate students who worked with me through a grant for the entire summer last summer, making all the work that you see in the gallery. The 3 of us working nonstop to get it all done. So I owe a lot of the handwork to them.
Yes. All right, we've got a question from Reagan. What was the last name of the first artist that you discussed with the abstract imagery? Her first name was Annette, I believe.
It's Messager, and it's spelled like messenger without the N. Messeger.
Thanks. All right, we've got a question from Nolan. It's really interesting how the birds and banners crossed over in that one picture that you showed. Was it intentional for the shadows to cross like that and represent how much social media has an influence on news and vice versa?
Yes. Yes, indeed. In fact, I think for me, I knew that the telephone poles were going to be where the birds started and ended, and that the trees were there for basically the trees came in for the patio lights, but the trees ended up being a huge aspect of the show. So it was kind of exciting that something so insignificant became so humongous. But I made sure, and Alyssa can attest to this, I made sure that everything crisscrossed in the gallery to create that sense of chaos and interlapping. See my little helpers? They're just everywhere today. Yeah, so it was important to me that things crisscross and touch. Like in the gallery, you'll see that certain wires and lines are kind of sitting on each other, going through the different aspects, the different parts. And yes, social media is invasive, and so is news.
Have you, in the process of making and showing this exhibit, met anyone who does not have an internal dialogue?
I have a best friend who doesn't have an internal dialogue.
Really?
Yes. And I marvel at it. When I sent that, I have this sort of set of 5 friends, and we, message back and forth. It's really ridiculous, these guys. I message back and forth with them on the daily about our kids' life, work, whatever we see, memes, everything. And when I sent that article to them, she said, I don't have an internal dialogue. I'm like, wait a minute, how can you not have an internal dialogue? You have anxiety, you have all these other things, right? Yeah. And she was like, no, there's sometimes just silence. And I was like, what? Like my mind then went insane for weeks, right? That they aren't constantly thinking of all the things. I'm constantly thinking of all the things. There is no moment of separation of all the things for me. And my partner just walked in.
Yeah, as I've had small groups of students come in or just visitors come in that I get to talking to, I always ask them if they have an internal dialogue, and they all have said yes.
Like I say, it's only 15% of the population.
So what has your friend said about your exhibit? Has she gotten to see it?
She's in it.
Okay.
So she's in many of the laundry photos. Those moms are in there. Those mom friends are in there. She likes the exhibit. She thinks it's very representational of the me that she knows, right? Because they get those conversations that you can't exercise, that you can't get out of your head. They get all of that in the text. I'm thinking about this, like 3 a.m. I'm texting them, right, when I'm awake. And usually Jen is still up and Alexa is sleeping and has turned her phone to silent. And Tanya may or may not be awake, but, could respond. And Julie is usually asleep then. So it just depends on who's doing what. But Jen's almost always awake doing the same thing I'm doing at 3 a.m.
All right, we've got a question from Emily. How long does the installation process take? How do you know when it's done being set up?
Well, so far, the show that I had in Mexico was not done. They stopped short. I sent them way more work than they needed for the space, but I couldn't go because of COVID, and the gal, another artist from San Antonio who was down there for a residency, hung the exhibition and hit the threshold of overwhelmed for herself and stopped installing. And when I saw the images of the show, I thought, oh, that's too nice. That's too palatable. That's too easy to experience. But I thanked her. I did what I did because at that point she had other things to do. But in both San Antonio and in Louisiana, I was part of the installation and had a lot of help to do it. And in both of those exhibitions, I showed everything I had. So the exhibition in San Antonio, I had to make a second set of work because my first set of work was in Mexico and overlapped by 3 days. So I had to make an entire second set of work. And making that work, I decided I would make it different. So the birds are from different pages of social media compilations, and all the news is different, and all the laundry images are different, because I thought that I remembered that the gallery at Meadows was very big. And so this has both the Mexico show and the San Antonio show together. And I still feel in that space that I would have been happier with about 6 or 8 more strands of banner lines to crisscross. And I think everything else felt right to me once we got it up. But the banner lines, I felt like we need a little bit more crisscross in the banner lines in the center of the room. So I don't know if I'll ever know it's done. Probably for sure done would be just filling the room up so that nobody could walk at all with just stacks of all of the stuff. Really,
Emily, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I said it's really loud in here.
Okay. Emily, I think there were 5 of us working for 2 days. It was like a 12-hour day and a 10-hour day. We just stopped for lunch, but otherwise we were working pretty much the whole time to get that show installed here.
Yeah, it took a day, it took a couple days.
Yeah, but we got it all done before you left town, which I thought was amazing.
We did, and I was super thrilled by that.
All right, we've got another question. What if you have an internal dialogue, but you just don't know how to exercise it properly?
I mean, I would say that, hold on one second. I would say that's what therapy's for, right? Like I marvel at people who don't have therapists. I mean, I don't have one right now, but a lot of times I do. And that kind of sounding board, and if you can't exercise it properly, finding somebody who can give you the skills to do that, either through mindfulness training or just like awareness. Like for me, I feel a little less stressed out about all the noise in my head now that I've made this piece, because I recognize that it's a state of being, and I can simply decide what I'm going to pay attention to, and the rest of it can be as loud as it wants. I don't have to pay attention. But it felt before I made this piece like I couldn't figure out what to pay attention to. So it kind of hit a fever pitch, I would say. So yes, I say use your resources, and therapy is one of those. Friends on text is one of those. Making art is one of those. Everybody has different things. Probably some people would say praying is one of those, and you know, to each their own, but find a way, because it does, the loud is too much.
All right, maybe we can wait and see if there's any more questions, but I don't have any at the moment.
Okay. Do you want me to show? I pulled up my website there for a second. I'm going to share screen and just share. I mentioned 2 different bodies of work that also use shape. I mentioned my love affair of the house shape, and this is an installation subdivision made from images of a cul-de-sac. So I created a double-ended cul-de-sac, and all of these houses are made from one family image and one image of some kind of fence line or natural foliage that keeps people out of your space. So it's kind of looking at the facade that we portray to the world. So you can see the images get cut out a little bit from being on the house shape. This is cute little baby me and my attention hog sister. So that's one body of work prior to this one. And then this is like panes of glass, the work that I mentioned. These are laser cut out and laser etched You can kind of see the details. These are all etched into the surface. And then face mounted imagery. So the imagery is mounted on the back of the acrylic. Family images that sort of talk about my childhood, my upbringing. And I think this piece is one of the most powerful in terms of thinking about that editing that happens through the outline, the silhouette of the object, and the cross section of the image. This is an image of my mom and my dad had Alzheimer's and sort of disappeared 10 years before he died. And I thought this representation was a really beautiful representation of sort of my mom's strength through the apron and her domestic role and her smile, and also the loss of that partner and leader of our family in that way. All right. Anything else come up?
Yes. All right. This will probably be the last question. From Kellen. As I walked through your gallery, I was really moved by the way that the exhibit made me think about my taken for granted ways of moving through life, specifically regarding my relationship to space and time. The division of daily life between public and private spheres has long been considered a hallmark of modern life. So has been the segmentation of time into calculable, exploitable intervals. Your exhibition brings to mind this stereotypical division of modern life, even as it refuses it. News articles that we may scroll past are held still, even in their repetition across the ceiling. Moments of a parent's relationship with their child are held still against their aging. And the shadow residues of the images evoke another sense of temporality and presence. I don't have a specific question per se, but your exhibition and its transformation of space and time brought me to a quiet reflection despite its chaoticness.
That's beautiful. I love it.
Well, thank you so much, Libby, for your time tonight and giving us this talk and extra information behind your exhibition and answering all of our questions. I really appreciate it, and I know that everyone else does too.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for coming.